Museum Ghost Stories, narrated by Phantom of Darkness, begins now. At the museum. At the beginning of May, I was offered what is to me a dream summer job. I'm working in my town's museum, giving tours, working with the artifacts, that sort of thing. Absolutely perfect for a history lover like me. The museum is 3 small buildings. The first building is very small, just like one room. It has a few displays to do with the town's sporting history, the first settlers to the area, and all our books and archives. It is also where the computer and phone is, so that is where I normally work when there aren't any visitors. The second building is the barn. This is one big room that is full of old farm equipment and horse racing equipment. The last building is the most popular part of the museum and my personal favorite. It's the log cabin. The cabin was built in 1860 and had families living in it for the next few hundred years. We have set it up so it looks like a typical farm home from the 1880s. To enter, you go through the back kitchen, then up a few steps into the main room. To the right of the main room are 2 small bedrooms. On the left is the staircase that goes to the attic, which is one large room that is filled with displays of old clothes. This building was where the strangeness occurred. Since the museum is so small, I work alone, unless a big tour comes through. On my first day, I was walking through the buildings, acquainting myself with all the exhibits. When people had asked questions, I would have answers. I went up to the cabin's attic. There I was hit with a powerful smell of horses. It was like I just had walked into a stable. After 5 or 10 seconds, the smell disappeared and was replaced by the ordinary museum smell. I looked around to try and find where the smell came from and found, thrown over the back of a chair, an old blanket that was used for people riding in horse-drawn carriages about 120 years ago. I picked it up and took a sniff, since it was the only thing even vaguely horse-related in the building, but it only smelt of old cloth. Well, it was a strange thing, but I had work to do, so I put it out of my mind. A few days later, I was again in cabin, sweeping the main room, trying to make it pretty for the day's guests, when bang, bang, something began to pound on the front door. Now, the front door is bolted from the inside and only opened on days when there's a big tour. There is a window beside the door so I could see if anyone passed. I opened the door, but of course, there was no one. This happened again a few minutes later, and again there was no one. By this point, I was getting spooked, so I started looking for anything that could account for the noise. Tree branch, construction, giant squirrel, anything. But I couldn't find a single explanation. On another day, while I was walking past the barn, I heard people talking inside. Thinking it was visitors had come in, without me seeing, I went in to check. Completely empty. Later that same day, I was in the back kitchen when I heard footsteps in the main room. Now, there is no way anyone could have gotten in there without passing me. Torn between fear and curiosity, I went in to see what was going on. There was no one in the room, but I saw a woman's foot at the top of the stairs going into the attic. She had on dark shoes and a long dress. I followed up the stairs, but when I reached the top, the room was empty. Fear overcame curiosity, and I ran down the stairs and back to the office where nothing strange ever happens. Since then, I haven't seen anything. I do, however, occasionally hear light footsteps, the swish of a dress, and murmured conversations. I'm working in the museum until September and can't really say if I hope to see more of the ghosts and learn who they are, or if I hope it all quiets down. I guess time will tell. At the Museum, Part 2. I wrote earlier about my job in the local museum. If you haven't read that story, it would be a good idea to do so now, just to get an idea of the layout of the buildings and to know what has happened so far. A few days after I had written my last story, I was sitting at my desk in the office building. This building has a door facing the street that I keep popped open with a brick so people passing by will see that the museum is open. There I was sitting and cataloged some old books when I heard a loud scraping noise. I looked up and saw the brick sliding away from the door. Then the door slammed shut. I ran over to see what had caused it but could not find anything. The wind wasn't strong enough to push the door shut, and there was no one around. The brick hadn't just been pushed by the door, it looked as though it had been pulled away, allowing the door to slam. This has happened 5 times overall. 2 of the times it was quite windy out, so I assumed the wind was the culprit. But for the other 3 times, I haven't a clue. For the first month or so that I worked in the museum, I always had a strange feeling whenever I walked into the cabin. It was like I had just barged in somewhere uninvited. It never felt totally mean, and I never felt threatened, but I never felt welcomed either. In fact, as the days went on, I began to feel as if whatever was there was teasing me. I would hear whispers or footsteps from one room, go to check it out and hear those noises in the room I had just left. Other times, I would put something down, turn away, and when I looked back, it would be moved. Not a lot, but enough that I could tell. This went on until one day, about 2 weeks ago. That was a rough day. Genius that I am, I had stayed up way too late the night before, and as a result, was very tired. It had been raining and my feet were wet. I hate that. To top it all off, the very first thing I saw when I went into the cabin was a giant spider. I hate them even more than wet feet. In short, I was very cranky tour guide. As I was opening up the cabin that lousy day, one of the table's clothes began whipping back and forth loudly and quickly. Before that day, when something happened that I couldn't explain, I would get spooked. That day though, I was in no mood to be played around with, so I just rolled my eyes and said whatever and continued on with my work. The tablecloth instantly stopped moving, and from between me and the table, I heard a soft giggle. Since that day, whenever I walk into the cabin, it feels warm and welcoming. I no longer feel like I don't belong there. Things still happen, but it doesn't feel like teasing. The latest strange thing to happen in the cabin was last weekend. There had been quite a few visitors, and as a result, I was there later than usual. In the cabin, I saw wet footprints on the floor in the back kitchen. They looked as though someone with wet feet had walked from the doorway to the main room to where there was a larger wet spot in front of the table where the guest book is. Exactly what you would get if somebody with wet shoes had stood there for a few minutes reading the names. Now, this in itself wouldn't have been odd except for one thing. I had been in the kitchen and had just walked to the doorway to tell my mom I would be a few more minutes. There were no prints when I walked to the door, and they were there when I turned back. I was tired and it was late, so I decided to ignore it and close up for the night. As I walked from the kitchen to the main room, I saw someone poke their head out of a bedroom, look at me, then go back into the room. I couldn't make out any details since they were between me and the light and was just a silhouette. All I could tell was the person was about the same height as me. 5 feet. Yeah, I know, I'm a shorty. It seemed to me as if they were saying, "You still here?" I went into the room to check, but of course it was empty. Like I said, it had been a long day and I was so tired. So I just closed the curtains, turned out the lights, told whoever was there good night, and went home. Ghost of Gar Museum and Library. Long-time reader, first-time poster. Let me start off by saying I have had plenty of paranormal experiences when I was younger. Nothing too major has happened since I was around 17. This happened not too long ago, last week, March 19th. I started volunteering at a local Civil War museum and library, the Grand Army of the Republic Civil War Museum and Library. It was a regular day there. Only myself and another senior volunteer, A, were there. It was the afternoon, maybe about 2 to 3 p.m. A was responding to some emails, and I was reading a book from the library when I heard a large crash. I knew for sure it came from inside the house. We're not in the best neighborhood, the Frankfurt section of Philadelphia. I had the security monitors turned on and looked at the parking lot. Our vehicles were fine. I told A I was looking outside. Nothing in the parking lot. The front was fine. I looked over the fence into the vacant house next door. It has no back door, so I thought maybe a vagrant or someone was in there stealing some metal. I went back into the car. I told A I didn't see anything outside. I checked the library area. That was fine. I went up to a storage where we had old newspapers. Those shelves are fine, nothing on the floor. I shut off all the lights there. Then I recalled someone looking at the piano to see if he would be interested in taking it. I went up to our meeting room, and that room and piano were fine. I shut off all the lights there and used the bathroom. I thought since A and myself were the only ones there, I'd leave the toilet seat up. We have a unisex bathroom. No more sounds were heard. A little while later, I had to use the bathroom again. As I was going through the library area, I noticed the light on the staircase that leads to the newspaper room was on. I have a good memory and always pay attention to detail. I knew for sure I turned this off. I flicked the switch at the bottom a few times and it wouldn't go off. I climbed the steps and shut it off at the top. I came back and flipped the bottom on and off again. This time, the bottom worked perfectly. I went up to the bathroom and, to my surprise, the toilet seat was down. I used the facilities and went back to the office. Then I noticed on the monitor a drape appeared to be broken on the 3rd floor. The two of us went up and the 3rd floor light was on. The drape was also up. I stood directly under the camera and it looked different. We did some detective work, and after digging around for a while, we found about 5 or 6 pictures knocked over. A said this was probably what we heard. We were on the 1st floor, office, nowhere near these pictures. This would have happened nowhere near as loud falling. The glass on the pictures, even one that fell on an exposed radiator pipe, were fine. We put the pictures back and left for the day. Later at home, I was wondering if there was any reason that happened. I checked on the internet and didn't see anything significant. No major bottles fought on this day or anything like that. We did have some weird items including, but not limited to, a stuffed horse head and stuffed donkey head, blood-stained sheets from President Lincoln's deathbed, and some stuff from Andersonville prison. Then it dawned on me. Earlier that day, when reading, I had hummed a few notes of Dixie. This was my only experience there so far. I've only had been volunteering there for about a month. If happenings like this continue, it will be another reason for me to continue volunteering there. For those not familiar with the GAR, it's also known as the Ron House. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, Pennsylvania Register of Historic Places, and the Philadelphia Register of Historic Places. It was built in the 1790s and spent over 100 years as a doctor's home and office. It was also a Grand Army of the Republic post for a while before becoming a museum. A South New Jersey ghost haunting group was there a while ago and claimed they found 3 ghosts there. an angry ghost in the basement, a child who roams, and John Ron's first wife, Elizabeth, in the third floor area. The ghost hunters had claimed John's wife, Elizabeth, had become angry during an EVP session when they asked if she was aware if her son and husband had served as Confederate doctors. I'll be up in their third floor area tomorrow maintaining some firearms. I'll check those pictures again and post if there's anything significant on them. I'll also try to stay in camera view just in case. The full-bodied apparition at the Doncaster Air Museum. Some years ago, whilst taking part in a ghost hunt at Doncaster Air Museum, I was in a group of fellow ghost hunters in the middle of a vigil, just calling out for some form of spirit communication. We were sitting in the large hangar, and there was said to be where the planes were repaired during the Second World War, and prior to that had been Doncaster's International Airport. The night was a cloudless summer night. It was also a rather mild time of the night too. The group was in good spirits, already in anticipation for a night of ghost hunting. The adrenaline was starting to pump around the body of all of us. We were calling out for spirit activity when suddenly 5 of the group saw the solid mass of a human shape move directly past the larger than normal doorway. We immediately ran to the doorway to investigate who or what had fleeted past the door, but not a soul was to be seen in the few seconds we had taken to reach the doorway. They had literally disappeared. From the whole area, when we reached the doorway, we inadvertently set off the security lights, but most shockingly outside the hangar, there was a pea gravel all around the area of the Air Museum, which, when the ghost hunters walked on it, made an incredible noise that could be heard from our chairs in the hangar. However, we had heard no noise from the visitation we had seen. And another sobering thought also materialized. The figure literally walked straight through the disabled handrails that led into the hangar doorway. As we added up all this information, the cold realization hit in every one of us that we had indeed been very fortunate to have come within meters of a full-bodied apparition. I asked Alan, who was staffing the Air Museum that night, whether anyone else could have walked by the doorway, as the figure we had seen was much bigger than Alan's. Alan stated that no one else was on the grounds, as the gates were all locked and the high fencing was quite difficult to climb up, and the security light would have come on in the event of someone walking in. The group all commented that we must have indeed seen a full-bodied apparition, as in all of our endeavors to point the figure being human, we could not see how it was possible for a human figure to walk by the security lights without setting them off. How no noise was heard from the figure walking on the surrounding pea gravel, and there was no trace or sign immediately after the incident. The ghost hunters who witnessed this still chat about the time. We all saw a full-bodied apparition at Doncaster Air Museum. Heritage Square Museum, California. I volunteer at a museum called Heritage Square in Pasadena, California. I've been volunteering there for 6 years. I've always known about Heritage Square. I live right up from the street from it. I grew up with it and always loved it as a kid. I only wish I had signed up sooner. I never felt anything as a guest. I guess I never really noticed. My mother would always feel stuff and would ask the volunteers about it. They were never allowed to talk about it, but they still told her off the record. It was not until I started to volunteer there that I would feel and see things. It did not take long for me to get all these things. It was always one house, the Hale house. Maybe because I was in that house a lot. The little boy is a playful boy. Fun too. Within the last 3 years, I started to notice stuff in the other houses. I never had been scared by anything that would happen to me in the house. I always enjoyed seeing the spirits or feeling them around the museum. Every now and then, the museum invites ghost investigators to come. I was invited to 2 of them. I was thrilled by it. I knew it would be interesting to go, and I would have fun and stuff would come up. The first one I was on was just the investigators and the museum staff. We got fun stuff. We were on our last house and did get stuff. One of the investigators and I sat down and started talking to see if anything popped up. Nothing much. Before I knew it, I had the cold chill on the left side of my body. I told the investigator. He sat next to me and felt it too, and he smelled cologne. I did not smell it. I asked him if it was Old Spice. He told me he wasn't sure. But I knew who it was. I said, "Is this Oscar Levy Thomas?" And it was my grandfather. We chatted with him for some time. I then realized the weird things and feelings I was getting earlier in that house. The chat was fun. The second investigation was one that was open to the public. I was invited to help out with that one. I was only glad I did not sign up for it. I was asked if I was going to do it. I said I am broke and can't afford it. The person said, "You don't have to pay, just volunteer it." So I agreed to do it. The night of that public investigation, they explained all the rules to the guests for the museum and told them who we all are. During that, I kept getting a funny feeling someone was looking at us or staring at me. Now guess which it was. It was the building across from the gift shop, the Hastings house. It was on the porch. I kept looking to get a better look. There was no one there. The ghost realized I knew it was there. It was thrilled I could see it. It was like, "Oh, you can see me. I am here." That's what I kept getting. I am here. You can see me. I took a photo, but don't know if anything came out on it because I have not had a chance to look. The investigation finally started. We went to 2 of the houses and got some stuff, but didn't get much. Then we went to the 3rd house, which was the Hastings house. Right before they started the tour, the investigators told me they heard my nickname 3 times on the tour before us. Weird. We did our tour in that house. Some pulled out there, like a new toy they got for ghost hunting that they don't know how to use it quite yet. It was very cool. One of those things a spirit can talk into and you can hear them right away. It was speaking like crazy, then stopped. I asked if I could borrow it and I walked around with it and spoke like crazy with me. Was it goofing off or was it serious? I tried to get it to talk more, but would not speak much. It kept saying help in letters. The rest of the house, we didn't get much, but heard new stories, ones I was glad to hear. At the end of the night, I found out which staff was on the tour before us in the Hastings house. So I asked him about my name being called, and he confirmed it. Weird. Ghosts seem to come to me at the museum now. I am scared of one of the museum, that I've never been scared of. But since the first investigation, I am scared now. The Shaw House, the doctor's office, I still go in the dark and turn off all the lights and they turn on by themselves. I like the thrill of it and being scared. This is why I volunteered to go into the house to turn off all the lights and lock up or get things because I like to see ghosts and so on. And I am not scared out of my wits quite yet. I have many more stories about that museum. The Heritage Museum. Hey guys, it's been a while since I've been on, but my son has a great story for you. He went on a field trip a couple of weeks ago to a historical museum in our town. It is located within walking distance from his school. I'd say about a 10-minute walk. Now I'll give you a little background information on Ash. Ash is 10 years old, he is highly intelligent, and he's a child who has ADHD, but has the biggest heart. When he came home from school that afternoon after the field trip, he was very excited and told everyone about it. And now I will turn this over to him. We went to the museum. First, we went to the gun room and looked at the old Civil War guns. I really liked the shotgun and the grenade. Next, we went to the attic and we saw things that the shelves would use to cook, clean, and other chores. When we were coming down from the attic, I was standing upstairs in my class waiting to go outside. When it was time to go, I was pushed and heard a little girl laughing. It was weird, but cool at the same time. After school, I told Mom and she believed me. Some other people made fun of me. Mom told me not to listen to them because people have different beliefs than us. She said as long as I told the truth, that's all that mattered. Thank you very much for reading Ash's story. I do believe him. It is a toss-up for this museum. Some say it is, and some say it is not. If you would like more information on it, I will gladly guess it. Thank you. The Museum of Witchcraft. This is an experience of when I was in Stratford upon Avon in May 2008 for my coursework. I was with my friends Rebecca and Chris, and we were a group having to do a lot of work. We had already completed most of it from our first visit about a month ago, so this time we were allowed basically to do our own stuff, and since we were doing about tourism, we decided to visit some tourist attractions. The thing that I really wanted to do was the Museum of Witchcraft and Wizardology, and my friend Rebecca had promised that we would do it, and so we did. From the outside, it looked really good and interesting, and when we went inside, the woman at the desk was handily dressed as a witch, and there was Harry Potter and other scary music playing. It did seem a little corny, but I was a little bit scared, and so were Rebecca and Chris. Once we had paid, the woman told us about it and how it was one of the most haunted buildings in Stratford, and that priests and ghost hunters had visited it and made contact with spirits there. She then warned us that we should hold on when going upstairs, as they had a spirit that liked to push. We set off and looked at the exhibitions, reading the handy leaflet as we went. The museum was tiny and basically set up in someone's house. It was a bit scary, and we did all feel a push when going upstairs or down them. Some of the rooms provided lots of information and scares, but it was still a bit cheesy thinking back. However, there was one room that I really didn't want to go in. I don't know why, but something about it made me freak out and I couldn't go in. Rebecca said that she felt in, but Chris, being man, went in first and showed us all that there was nothing to be afraid of. He went in and me and Rebecca followed. I was shaking and holding onto Rebecca's arm with such a tight grip. Eventually, I calmed down and felt a little bit at ease, but we all felt like we were being watched. We couldn't read the booklet because it was so dark, but we had a bit of adventure, and then I left and waited in the corridor, which was all right. In some rooms, you could feel a pressure, a bit of a panic, whether it was just me. I was scared shitless, and I hated it. When we did leave, we sat on a bench and read the booklet and read some of the stories about ghosts in the rooms. It was scary. Almost every room was said to have had a ghost of some sort in it, and a lot of people had seen them. We hadn't seen anything, just felt things, and I didn't want to go back to any room. After spending some time there, I came back home. I know this probably wasn't the most scariest story in the world, but I appreciate you reading.